Civil rights attorney and author Noura Erakat is eyeing the White House. It's worth noting Noura is also a full professor at Rutgers University. She is an intellectual giant. Uh, anyway, Noura Erakat is eyeing the White House, so to speak, as she's considering running on the Green Party ticket in the vice presidential slot alongside Jill Stein. Noura posted a thread on X, formerly known as Twitter, that's getting a lot of attention that I think is worth examining. So let's examine it, y'all. Nora goes on Twitter and says Jill Stein's team approached me to run as her vice presidential running mate or vice presidential candidate, and I am seriously considering it. The Harris team demanding our votes to quote save our democracy, but has been oblivious to the fact that supporting a genocide poses the most significant threat to it. The United States is sending weapons to Israel in violation of U.S. law, including the Leahy Amendment in Section 6201 of the Foreign Assistance Act on the delivery of humanitarian aid, to say nothing of international law, including recent ICJ decisions and the ICC request for arrest warrants. More, polls have consistently shown disapproval of Biden's handling of the war, and most recently, a Gallup poll showed that 55% of all Americans disapprove of Israel's military action. Meanwhile, protesters demanding ceasefire and an arms embargo have been attacked, brutalized, doxxed, and punished. Saving our democracy means a U.S. arms embargo and support for a permanent ceasefire. When Vice President Harris told anti-war protesters in Michigan, "I am speaking," it reminded me of the millions of people around the world who have been speaking out against American complicity in the bombing of Palestinians, primarily children. She's on fire. Palestinians can't eat words or sympathy. We need real commitments to change, commitments that speak to voters in swing states like Michigan and Georgia, to show that VP Harris will finally ensure, at bare minimum, its weapons are used in compliance with U.S. law. That's a lie, yo. So I have a lot to say, or a lot of thoughts about this, and I hope that Nora will come on. She's supposed to come on the show anyway. A few weeks ago, we talked about her coming on, so I'm hoping that now she'll definitely be able to come on and talk through this with us. Nora, of course, is a colleague of mine, a dear friend of mine, my sister, my friend, my homegirl, my buddy. So I want to lay that on the table, as you all may accuse me of having some bias. Um, but I thought that this was interesting for multiple reasons. One, I've never, I wasn't familiar with people. Um, how can I put it? Sort of announcing that they're considering a run for VP. Usually, they accept it or they don't accept it, and if you don't accept it, you don't say anything about it. In 2016, I was offered the vice presidential slot. On a Jill Stein ticket in the summer of 2016. I decided not to, for several reasons, but I didn't say anything at the time. I've only mentioned it once or twice afterward. I mean, years afterward. I'm not saying that to critique Nora. I'm just saying to say this is an unorthodox choice. I'm curious to know why Nora doesn't do anything by accident. Or I won't say anything, but she's very thoughtful and very strategic, and one of the most principled people I've ever met. So I'm sure the reason why she's leaking that, so to speak, not leaking it, but sort of teasing us with that, is for a reason, and I don't know what the reason is, but I'm interested to know what the reason is. But she's also offering the kind of principled critique of Kamala Harris that we just talked about a moment ago, in saying that, look, it's not enough to just be a woman. It's not enough to just be black. It's not enough to just say you want peace. You have to actually earn our votes. And when Kamala Harris stepped up in Michigan and responded to protesters by saying, "I am speaking," and if you want George Bush, just say that, it did frustrate and alienate some sectors of her potential voting base. And when I said that, y'all said, oh, it doesn't matter. No one's tripping. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. But as you see, it's energized her opposition. It's frustratingly energized people who were sitting home for Biden and were now going to stand back up, or at least who were open to it, who could be persuaded, who were in the zone where they could be talked to and engaged and persuaded to make whatever choices they think they should make. So it's it was just such an un what do you call it? What do you call it? It's an error, but it's like an unforced error. It's an unforced error by the Harris campaign. Uh, and they gave no signal, both in policy or in performance, that they are willing to stop the genocide in Gaza. They want us wanting a ceasefire is one thing, and it's also important to say, well, what does it mean to want a ceasefire? Are we talking about a permanent ceasefire? Are we talking about what ultimately is just a long humanitarian pause? Like, what does it mean? Because the humanitarian pause, at one point, was being presented as 48 hours, 72 hours. So if they say, "Oh, we had a ceasefire, it was 72 hours," it's like, no, that ain't what we talked about. So we don't know enough to know where the Harris administration is on this issue. And over time, we will certainly find out, and I can't wait to find out. Um, but Noura is saying, look, this response to us, or this response to protesters, particularly Arab and Muslim protesters, was wholly unacceptable, but reflective of a deeper sensibility. This isn't a gotcha because you made one mistake. This isn't a, hey, you did something I didn't like, so I'm never going to rock with you again. It's saying that, hey, there are fears about this kind of thing, and the fears have been confirmed by the circumstances. That's something else. Um, Noura Erakat broke the whole thing down, right? She's saying this. We have to question what it means to save our democracy if we're violating all the laws to do so. We gotta interrogate that. That's why we need Noura to come for office hours to break this down for us, like only an Usteza can do. But what does it mean if Noura Erakat runs on the Green Party ticket? This is not a small thing. Noura is adored by lots of people, but particularly by the Palestinian people. And in the United States, among Palestinian Americans, she is a legend. So if Noura Erakat decides to run on that ticket, and I think Jill Stein knows this, that could change the balance of power in Michigan. That could change the balance of power in Pennsylvania. Because if there's a slice of people that say, yeah, I just can't pull that lever for genocide, and Nora's right over there with Jill, and they're anti-war, and it's pro-peace, like, let's make it happen. And that's the calculation that they're going to have in their minds. So Noura eyeing the Green Party could be a leverage move, hoping that Democrats be like, yo, we got to do something, because if Noura and Jill Stein are going to shave some points. It's like, oh, UNLV basketball team. So we got to think about that. But there's also the ethical and principle question of, is it right to remain silent in a moment of genocide? Is it right to vote for the lesser of two evils when the evil is so extraordinary? How do you make sense of this? These are the questions that we're going to have to think through. Noura Erakat could absolutely turn Michigan. I know it sounds crazy to think about, one person affecting a state, but again, Pennsylvania was only lost by 10, 20, 30,000 votes, right? When Trump won. There's no reason to believe that Noura couldn't convince enough people to vote that direction that then gives Trump Pennsylvania or Michigan. Now, I'm not blaming Noura or Palestinians or protesters for Trump potentially winning again. Ultimately, the burden and the blame is on the Democratic Party for not offering a candidate that voters want to vote for. I mean, ultimately, people do have free will. I just think that at this juncture in history, we have to ask ourselves, what is the consequence of this move versus that move? And again, Noura is principled and brilliant, and I'm not worried that she's doing something hasty or dumb or unprincipled. I just want to know sort of collectively how we're going to think and strategize about this kind of stuff. Because, man, It's hard out here. So I wish Nora luck in whatever choice she makes. I'm excited to talk to her about it. I hope that she talks about it